Passage number 3. Ready? Comments. I am obliged to honorable members of this house because they have welcomed a number of proposals. A number of suggestions have been made by members so far as the different classes are concerned. I would assure them that the joint committee would go into all these provisions and make such improvements, if any, as they consider necessary. I would only reply in a general way to certain points raised by honorable members. A number of members made a reference to the earlier part of this bill in which provisions regarding the land revenue administration have been laid down. Probably they are not aware that there are exactly similar provisions in some of the land revenue code which has been in use for, I believe, a very large number of years, and the provisions of which have on the whole been found very satisfactory. Similarly, we have a land revenue code in Madhya Pradesh. A large number of provisions in this bill concerning the land revenue administration have been taken from these two codes amongst others. Under the circumstances, I would submit to this house that when these provisions have been found by experience to be satisfactory, we ought to apply them to Tripura also. Had the honorable members seen that there were similar provisions in this land revenue codes about sales, record of rights, correction of boundaries, preparation of maps, etc., they thought that these were new provisions. They are exactly the same as contained in the original provisions made by our leaders during the framing of rules. Under the land revenue codes, a number of matters have to be decided by the land revenue authorities. One member was struck by a provision that all the property not owned by an owner vested in government. That is one of the fundamental principles on which the right to land is based. If any particular land is owned by a private person, then different considerations arise. Otherwise, as under the Maharashtra Land Revenue Code, some provisions have to be made because you cannot think of any property without any owner. Here you will agree that government on behalf of the people have to hold all these lands. That is the reason why such a provision has been made. Execution sales under the Land Revenue Act have to be provided for. Appeals have to be provided for, and it would not correct to say that these provisions have to be taken over from the codes of civil procedure or from some other legislation. The Land Revenue Code has to be complete in itself. In this territory of Tripura, it was found that there were a number of acts, but they were not up to date, they were not complete. That is why in this bill we have introduced in the earlier part all the provisions regarding land revenue administration. Then certain objections were raised regarding the principles that we had followed in making certain land reform proposals. In this connection, I may add that we have got the second 5-year plan where the whole question has been discussed in all its aspects and general lines have been laid down on which every state government is expected to proceed. In respect of land reforms, the second 5-year plan has suggested that immediate steps ought to be taken. For example, the planners point out that there ought to be the abolition of intermediates. They refer some of the states where such intermediaries have been abolished, and they have pointed out that it ought to be done so far as Tripura is concerned. The state of Tripura was specially mentioned, and that is the reason why we have to a large extent naturally borrowed from the principles laid down in the second 5-year plan. If these two items are taken into account, the land revenue codes in the various states for land revenue administration and the principles laid down in the second 5-year plan for introducing reforms on a number of points, then possibly a large volume of the criticism which has been made here will disappear. I will not like to go deeply into the various provisions. A point was made that unauthorized occupation should be regularized by bringing it down almost to the date of the bill itself. That would not be a proper method. So far as unauthorized occupation is concerned, it has to be provided against except where in the interest of the people it can be regularized. Another point was made that if a tenant or a person in possession did not cultivate the land properly, he ought not to be evicted immediately. I was surprised at my honorable friend contending that even if the land was not cultivated for 12 years, no action should be taken within 12 years. That is not the correct attitude to take. We should also understand that while the interests of the agriculturists have to be fully safeguarded, we have also to take into account the larger public interest of the country